So crazy news. Adam Schefter just dropped a bomb. Aaron Rodgers wants to be traded. He does not want to play with the Packers anymore, so there's that to start this day off. We've also got Tim Tebow returning to the NFL potentially. He wants to play tight end in Jacksonville. Keith Smith, how can you top that?
I don't know if I can. That was why I was paused. I had not seen that Adam Schefter report. That's crazy.
That just literally came down about 5 minutes ago. Here's the tweet. Reigning MVP Aaron Rodgers is so disgruntled with the Packers that he has told some within the organization he does not want to return to the team. League and team sources told ESPN on Thursday. That's essentially like LeBron James going to the buses and saying, I don't want to be here anymore, right? I mean, that's that kind of story.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what that would be like. It'd be, maybe even, bigger than that because he's only ever been with the Packers. He's, kind of become Mr. Packer there. So yeah, that is, I'm struggling to think that would have been like when there was those rumors of Kobe Bryant was, hey, I'm interested in being traded.
Yeah.
That was interesting.
I want to get your opinion. Last night, I know the Hawks were very short-handed. Philly kind of waxed them last night, but it was nice to see the Sixers have been struggling there. They lost the 2 games to Milwaukee shorthanded. They lost the game to Phoenix shorthanded. They lost the game to Golden State shorthanded. But I guess last night and the game against Oklahoma City was kind of all right, this team was struggling because they were shorthanded. They looked pretty smooth last night, getting George Hill in there. But really, Keith, having Ben Simmons, I think that not having Ben Simmons shows how important he really is.
He is. He remains their single best playmaker off the dribble for himself and for others. They don't have anybody else who can replicate that. And I know that maybe sounds a little silly because he's a 6'10" guy who's running all over the place and making plays off the bounce. Not a lot of teams have that, but the next best guy for Philadelphia off the dribble is probably Shake Milton, and that's a pretty big downgrade. No knock against Shake Milton, who's carved out a pretty nice role for himself, but Simmons is clearly very, very important to this team. And I think these last couple games also show when they've got everybody, they can beat anybody. They're right there. They will contend for a title. But if they're missing any of their guys, they're in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that goes a long ways for both. But Ben Simmons, Keith, if you could only read our text and see our engagement about Simmons, how polarizing of a player he is. People think he stinks. They want to get rid of him. He can't play. He doesn't score. He doesn't shoot. But I think it clearly shows he might be one of the more underappreciated players in the entire league about how important he really is to the success, because they can have Joel Embiid out there, and I think he might be the MVP of the league, but without Simmons, defensively is where that team falls apart, and that is so undervalued in this league.
Yeah, absolutely, and that it's there. There's 2 things that come to mind I always think about with Ben Simmons is one of the first is there's so much focus on what he can't do, and that's shoot the ball with range. And then that ends up overlooking all of the great things he can do. Like I said, he's 6'10", and he's essentially a point guard. He is able to make plays off the bounce that guys his size just can't do. He is maybe I'm not even going to say maybe. I'm just going to go with it. He is the game's most versatile defensive player. He will defend anybody 1 through 5, defend them well, really handle them, handle his own in there. So that is, when you don't have that, that becomes a huge deficit because nobody else has anything that they can do to really kind of match that. And that becomes really tough when he's not in that mix as a big player in for them because like I said, there's just nobody who can do that. Matisse Thybulle can do some of the defense. Milton can do some of the offense creation, but nobody can do all of it.
So in your opinion, we're coming down the stretch. Brooklyn's in first. They're a game up, 3.5. You look out west, you've got Utah, a game up on Phoenix. The West is really hard because the Lakers didn't have AD and LeBron. They're 9 back, but they're the 5 seed right now. Denver's playing well without Murray. Clippers obviously still in the mix. In today's NBA right now, does an offensive-minded team win, or does a defensive-minded team have a shot in today's game?
I think a defensive-minded team has a shot provided they have guys who can create offense late in games. If you are just we lock it in defensively, but that's really all we can do, you're going to struggle in the playoffs. The playoffs is all about owning individual matchups and being able to have somebody you can throw the ball to and trust that guy is going to get you a good shot or he's going to create a good shot for himself. And that is, that's kind of what is defined every team that has won. Even if we go back to that Toronto Raptors team, for all that they were probably known as a defensive team, you had guys like Kyle Lowry, Kawhi Leonard, Fred VanVleet, and even Norman Powell that could create offense off the dribble, go get themselves a good shot whenever they needed one. And that's something that you have to win playoff games.
Right. And so if I were to ask you, how would you classify what is the identity of Philadelphia?
I think they're a defensive-minded team first, but they do have guys you can throw the ball to and feel like they can get you a pretty good shot. Simmons is one of them. It gets a little bit harder on him in the playoffs for sure. His teams will scheme for him. They're going to do some different stuff. But clearly you have Joel Embiid. His ability to play great deep in the ball games has made all the difference. And then Tobias Harris. If you get the Tobias Harris in the postseason that has been around for most of this year, that lifts Philadelphia from being a very good team to a potential title contender because he is a guy who you can, I think at this point, trust against anybody but the absolute most elite of defenders that you can give him the ball and he's going to create a pretty good look. It's probably going to be for himself versus for others, but that's okay as long as he's able to get there consistently.
Yeah, that I think that's well put in terms of Harris. If they have the Harris that you get in the regular season, I think the fans can believe in this team. If you get a Harris that you've seen in past years, probably not. I think the big question, Keith, will be what kind of defense are teams going to throw at Philadelphia and Ben Simmons come playoff time? Like, do we see on a night-to-night basis on a regular season how teams are going to defend the Sixers in the regular season? Probably not.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. This year more than ever, there's no time to build schemes for individual opponents. There's no practice time. Most teams aren't even having shoot-arounds on game day because there's so many back-to-backs and 3 and 4 nights and all those kind of things. So what that does is you build a scheme that works for you defensively, and you just run that kind of regardless of the opponent on the other side. So what ultimately is going to happen in the first playoff series that Philadelphia plays, they're probably going to be better than the team because they're going to be a 1, 2, or 3 seed. I'm thinking they're probably going to be 1 or 2. And if they're 1 or 2, they're going to get a pretty weak first-round opponent. Unless it's Miami, they can be a little bit of a weird team, depending on how they look when they get there. But they should be favored. But what you're going to get a sense of is how our team's going to defend Simmons in that point, because what they'll really do there is you'll see them drop off him. You'll see them switch. You'll see them maybe even hide guys on him at times, especially when he's off the ball, and you'll switch around that. And that's going to be something that Philadelphia's going to have to work around, just like they have every other postseason. The good thing is now they've got some shooting around that they haven't had before, and that makes a difference compared to years past.
All right, I want to get your thoughts as we have we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So the Sixers have 10 games left. So we're about 10 games left in the season. Brooklyn, Philly, Bucks. Those 3 legit title contenders. Anybody else in the East you could see making the finals?
Yeah, it's hard. I probably should have given up already on Boston and Miami. It's just so hard when they did what they did last year in the playoffs to really kind of discount them. Both of those teams, Celtics a little bit more so, have been so banged up. Boston, it came out the other day, they've missed, I believe it's 167 games due to COVID-related absences.
Wow.
That is 10 to 15 more than any other team in the league, and that is more than, I want to say it's the bottom 11 to 12 teams combined have missed. So every time Boston looks like, all right, they've turned the corner, they're figuring this out, somebody else goes down and they're missing another guy. So, and we've seen when they have most of their guys, just how good they look, but they're so inconsistent. It's hard to believe in them. And then Miami, it's their offense is just not taking that step forward that I think we thought they might last year. They're so reliant on Jimmy Butler to do everything for them offensively that becomes a pretty big problem. So I think, what ultimately happens with those 2 teams is, if they really hit everything right and they're firing on all cylinders, they can maybe get in that mix. but it's got to almost go perfectly for them.
Is there a team, you said Boston and Miami. Is there a team right now? I know Washington's won 9 out of 10. New York has been 9 out of 10. Is there a team that one of those three don't want to face in the first round?
Yeah, I would say it's probably Boston or Miami. The Knicks, my worry for the Knicks is they almost kind of remind me of those first couple Philadelphia playoff teams where they were pretty good defensively, but then you saw their offensive limitations show up big time once they got into the postseason. And I'm afraid that's what's going to happen to the Knicks. They are so reliant on Julius Randle and R.J. Barrett to create just about everything for them. Derrick Rose does some off the bench. Emmanuel quickly does a little. But the rest of those guys, we talked about the need to have somebody you can throw the ball to and feel confident that guy's going to get you a good shot. I'm afraid teams are going to load up on Randall, and they're going to put R.J. Barrett in a position to say, all right, make it happen, kid. And I just don't know that he's quite there yet. I think the Knicks will become a scarier team in a year or two when they've added to that roster and those guys have more experience. But, yeah, Miami or Boston, I think you'd want to avoid them just more because of the pedigree than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, the way Beal and Westbrook are going, I mean, I can't imagine that Washington wins, but, man, that would not be fun to get stuck having to, try to get yourself through a 7-game series with them, right?
Yeah, nobody wants to deal with that because those two guys can almost win a playoff game or two by themselves. It's the same in the Western Conference with guys like Stephen Curry and Damian Lillard. And if that happens, all of a sudden now you're in a series you didn't expect to be in. And that's not where you really want to be. So I think that becomes a little bit of your problem there is, you don't want to face those teams that have those super dynamic scorers because they can create all kinds of problems for you they weren't really expecting to have.
All right, real quick, Keith Smith with us. Can you go over the play-in tournament and how this works? Because it's a little different from last year. They're having the 7 play the 8 to be the 7 team. Is that accurate?
That is correct. So 7 plays 8. The winner will be the 7th seed. Then the loser of that game goes into another game. They still have a shot. 9 plays 10. The winner of that game will play the loser of 7 versus 8 to be the 8th seed. What they tried to do was game it so that 7 and 8 they still only have to win one game. One game in the first, you win the first, you are the 7th seed. You can lose that first one, but if you win the second, you're in there as the 8th seed. My biggest problem with the play-in tournament is they didn't keep any kind of standings qualifier. Doesn't look like it's going to matter this year. Looks like everybody's going to stay close enough. But I hope in future years they go back to that tweak. Because if you're 4 or 5 games out, you didn't do enough in the regular season, in my mind, to even have a shot at the play-in just because you got hot for a couple games in the last week of the season.
Well, I mean, and theoretically, Miami's the 7. They are 3 games up on Charlotte. If they happen to lose a game, now they're the 8 or have to play for the 8. I'm like, if the season ended right now, I was 3 games better than you. I was the 7th seed. Why am I playing to be seeded 7th? Makes no sense.
Yeah, that part, yeah, and I don't know if you set that at 4 games or something like that, like they did in the bubble, where it was you got to be within 4 games to have a shot. I'm okay with that if that's the direction they went. I think your other challenge with the play-in, not challenge, I think benefit of the play-in is we only have about 5 teams that are kind of openly tanking this season versus at this point in the year, we're usually around 10, maybe even 12 teams. And we've got maybe a couple teams fighting for that final playoff spot. So I think we're now in a position where we have a lot more teams that are competitive. And I think that's really helped the product down the end because you're not having all these walkover games where you're turning it on. It's like, man, there's one good game tonight because half the league isn't really playing and doesn't really care.
Does the NBA, does the league feel like they fixed the tanking problem?
You don't know if they feel like they fixed it fully, but I think between the flattened lottery odds, which you're seeing a team like the Minnesota Timberwolves, because they were so poor early in the year, now that they're healthy, they're actually playing their guys because they're looking at it as, all right, we can't possibly win enough to get out of the flattened 1 through 4 lottery odds anyway. So we might as well play our guys, get some experience, and evaluate this roster. Between that at the bottom end and then the advent of the play-in tournament on the top end, I think they've done a lot to really kind of combat the tanking because you're sitting here with, like I said, you only got 4 or 5 teams, but even those really bad teams at the bottom, they're not playing it out from the ways where we've seen it in the past, where it's anybody who's even decent is, oh yeah, you have a hamstring strain or your back's bugging you. You
Right.
need to sit out for 2 weeks. Where we're seeing these guys actually play this out.
Oh, and I've constantly said that I like the idea of the first team that misses the playoffs gets the first pick in the draft. So in other words, if you were the 9 seed in the old format, I guess, if you finished 9th, you were rewarded for your team doing exactly what you just said. Hey, we're struggling. We had young players. We got off to a slow start, but we wanted to improve our team. We wanted to get those guys experience, and we're winning to get up the standings to get a better draft pick, not losing to go down. I know they would never do such a thing, but I love what you just said is, hey, these teams are actually playing players because they want to evaluate young, talented players.
Yeah, and that's what your hope is. I think the challenge with doing it that way is there's a couple things. One is it's very hard. This is where the whole idea of taking all the lottery teams and having them play a tournament for the number 1 pick to some extent falls apart for me, because what happens in that tournament is, if I'm the Oklahoma City Thunder, why do I want to play really hard to get us a good pick so some guy can come in and take my job? Well, what's my benefit as a player there? That benefits the organization, but not me. So I think you got to do some form of bonus for the players, whether that's, you incent them with a nice prize pool or something along those lines. I think that, could really work out. But yeah, I think, I think there are some tweaks you could make to the whole way. Back when the bubble kind of captured all of us, and we're like, this is great because there's no bad teams, right? There are no terrible teams in the bubble. So we were getting good game after good game after good game. I wrote a piece for Yahoo Sports how in a normal world environment, how the NBA could help kind of replicate the bubble. And that's out there if anybody wants to read it. You can just, look up Keith Smith, Yahoo Ideal NBA Season or something like that, and it'll pull it up for you. But that was the premise of, how do we create that excitement while also making the teams who are out of it still have something to play for at the end of the year.
At Keith Smith, NBA. Follow him on Twitter. And, of course, he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Sixers have the night off. They'll play the Hawks tomorrow night, and then they're back on Sunday against the Spurs on the road at the Bulls. They got 5 games next week at the Spurs, at the Bulls, at Houston, Pelicans, Pistons. So 5 games in 7 days for Philadelphia. They're still trying to get that number 1 seed, so they got to play well in those 5. Keith Smith, appreciate the time as always, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Enjoy the NFL draft tonight.